Aham was a young man living in a small town. His life was simple, but his dreams were not. Every morning, he woke up before the sun and worked in a small shop owned by an old man. He carried bags, cleaned the floor, and handled customers. His clothes were plain, his shoes were worn out, and his pockets were almost always empty. People saw him as nothing more than a poor helper. They laughed at his condition, and some even called him foolish for talking about his big dreams. Whenever he passed through the narrow streets of the town, children made fun of him. Men sitting in tea stalls smirked and whispered, "Look at him, always dreaming, but he will never be more than a shop boy." Women passing by would shake their heads and say, "Poor Aham, he does not know his place." Every word felt like a stone thrown at his heart, but he never let anyone see his pain. He kept walking, kept working, and kept dreaming. Inside his heart, he carried a fire. He wanted to prove that no one stays poor forever if they have courage. But he was not a man who argued back. When people mocked him, he stayed silent. When they insulted him, he smiled softly and turned away. His silence confused many, but only he knew that he was preparing for something bigger. He believed that success is not built in a single day. It takes time, patience, and hard work. In the town, there was a girl named Anaya. She belonged to a respected family. Her father was a businessman, and her house was one of the largest in the area. She was beautiful, educated, and proud of her status. Whenever she saw Aham, she could not stop herself from laughing. She would tell her friends, "This boy thinks he will become rich one day. Look at his condition. He cannot even buy proper shoes." Her friends joined her laughter, and together they made Aham the subject of their jokes. One afternoon, as Aham was carrying heavy sacks of rice to the shop, Anaya and her friends stood nearby. She pointed at him and said loudly, "Careful, Aham, don't break your back. You will need it to carry your big dreams." Everyone laughed. Aham's face turned red with embarrassment, but he did not reply. He placed the sack on his shoulder and kept walking. His silence only made them laugh harder. That night, Aham sat alone in his small room. The lamp flickered as he stared at the ceiling. He thought about the cruel words, the laughter, and the humiliation. His heart was heavy, but he whispered to himself, "One day, they will see. One day, I will rise." He wrote his goals in a small notebook, planning step by step how he would start saving money and learning about business. He had no guide, no mentor, and no financial support. All he had was his determination. Slowly, Aham started taking small steps. After finishing work at the shop, he spent hours reading old books about trade and business that he borrowed from a local library. He observed customers carefully, noting what they bought and what they avoided. He listened when traders discussed market prices. He absorbed every little detail like a sponge. The shopkeeper often told him, "Aham, you are wasting your time. Just do your work and don't dream too much." But Aham only smiled. He was determined not to let anyone kill his hope. The more he learned, the stronger his vision became. But still, life in the town did not change for him. People only saw his poor clothes, not his burning ambition. To them, he was still the boy who would never succeed. Anaya especially continued her mockery. She would often say, "If dreaming could make someone rich, Aham would be the richest man already." Her words cut deep, but Aham never allowed them to break him. One evening, while walking home, he saw children running behind him, chanting, "Dreamer! Dreamer!" They threw small stones and laughed. Aham stopped for a moment. He looked at them calmly, then bent down and picked up a stone. The children grew silent, thinking he would throw it back. But instead, Aham placed the stone in his pocket and said, "Every stone you throw will build my path." Then he walked away. The children stood confused, not understanding his words. At night, when the world was asleep, Aham's mind was awake. He imagined himself not in torn clothes, but in a fine suit. Not working in someone else's shop, but running his own business. Not being mocked, but respected by the same people who once insulted him. His dreams were clear, and his determination was unshakable. The town did not know that Aham's silence was not weakness. It was patience. His suffering was not failure. It was training. His journey was just beginning, and the first chapter of his story was being written in silence, sweat, and pain. And somewhere in that same town, Anaya had no idea that the boy she laughed at would one day return, not as a poor helper, but as someone who would shock her and everyone else. Days turned into months, and months into years, but Aham's routine never changed. He still worked in the same shop, still wore the same old clothes, and still kept his head low when people mocked him. But what no one could see was that inside, his mind was growing sharper every single day. He had started saving small amounts of money. Every coin he earned, he divided into two parts, one for survival and one for his future. Even when he felt hungry, he chose to sacrifice food rather than touch the money kept for his dreams. Slowly, his savings grew, though it still looked like nothing compared to the big plans he had in his mind. One afternoon, Aham overheard two traders talking about a small piece of land near the edge of town. They said it was useless, rocky, and no one wanted to buy it. But Aham's eyes lit up. He had studied enough to know that one day, that land could hold value. Quietly, he approached the owner and offered him every coin he had saved in the past 2 years. The man laughed and said, "You really want this useless land? Fine, take it. You are throwing away your money." But Aham was not throwing it away. He was planting the first seed of his empire. When the town heard about his decision, they laughed louder than ever. People gathered in the market, saying, "Look at Aham. He spent all his money on a dead piece of land. Truly, he is the biggest fool." Even Anaya, upon hearing this, burst into laughter. She told her friends, "He cannot even afford good shoes, yet he buys land. He thinks he is some big businessman." Her friends laughed with her, and once again Aham became a joke. But Aham stayed calm. Every morning, he walked to that land, stood there for a while, and imagined buildings, shops, and houses rising on it. People thought he was crazy, but he smiled silently. His vision was far greater than their laughter. Time tested him again and again. The shopkeeper reduced his wages, but Aham did not complain. His clothes became even more worn out, but he did not care. Instead, he worked extra hours at night, doing small jobs for merchants who needed help with accounts. With every extra coin he earned, he planned the next step. Meanwhile, Anaya's life was very different. She was admired in the town, always walking with grace, dressed beautifully, and surrounded by friends. Suitors came to her house with marriage proposals, but she always rejected them. She wanted someone rich, someone powerful. Often, she would joke, "If I ever marry a poor man like Aham, I would rather stay alone." Her words reached Aham through whispers in the town. They cut him deeply, but he never allowed bitterness to take over his heart. He only said to himself, "One day, her words will echo differently." Years passed slowly, and Aham's small piece of land began to show its worth. The town started expanding, and new roads were planned near that very spot. Traders suddenly realized the land was valuable. Many approached Aham to buy it, offering him double, even triple the price he had paid. But Aham refused every offer. He smiled and said, "This land is not for sale. This land is my future." The same people who mocked him now scratched their heads in confusion. "Maybe he is not as foolish as we thought," they whispered. But still, no one truly believed he could rise above his condition. One evening, Anaya and her friends passed by the land. She saw Aham standing there with a notebook in his hand, sketching something. Laughing loudly, she said, "Aham, what are you drawing? Palaces? Do you think one day you will live here like a king?" Her voice was filled with sarcasm. Aham looked at her for a moment. His lips curved into a small smile, but he said nothing. He simply closed his notebook and walked away. That silence was stronger than 1,000 words, but Anaya did not understand it then. Aham's determination never wavered. He used his savings to slowly start small trading businesses, buying and selling goods between towns. His nights were sleepless, his days were full of labor, but every coin he earned multiplied with his discipline. Slowly, he invested in more land, more opportunities. But in the town, his outward life still seemed the same. People continued to see the poor boy in worn clothes, carrying heavy loads, keeping quiet in the face of mockery. They had no idea that behind that silence was the making of a future millionaire. Anaya, too, continued her life without realizing how the tables were slowly turning. She still looked down on Aham, still laughed with her friends, and still carried the pride of her wealthy family. But fate had already begun writing a story for her, one that would connect her life with the very man she mocked. For now, Aham remained the silent dreamer, the poor boy in the eyes of the town. But deep inside, he knew his time was coming. The seed he planted was ready to grow, and soon, his silence would turn into the loudest surprise anyone had ever seen. Years passed, and the small boy in torn clothes was no longer the same. Aham had changed, though the town did not see it yet. His hard work and discipline slowly started to show results. The piece of land that once brought him laughter now became the turning point of his life. The government announced the construction of a new road passing right beside Aham's land. Suddenly, that useless rocky ground became a golden treasure. Traders who once mocked him now came running, offering him huge sums of money. Aham sold a part of the land at a price that was 10 times higher than what he had paid. With that money, he invested in a small real estate project. For the first time in his life, he saw the seed of his dream begin to sprout. But even as his wealth grew, he remained silent in the town. He still walked in the same old clothes, still bowed his head when mocked, still carried himself as a poor helper. No one knew that behind closed doors he was signing deals, building connections, and quietly expanding his empire. Aham never forgot the nights he had slept hungry, the days he had carried sacks of rice while people laughed. Those memories kept him humble. He decided that no one would know of his success until the right time. For now, he wanted to grow stronger, bigger, unshakable. Meanwhile, Anaya's life looked bright from the outside but was full of hidden worries. She had grown older, and her family now pushed her towards marriage. Suitors still came, but many were rejected because they were not wealthy enough for her taste. Slowly, whispers began in the town, "Anaya is too proud. She waits for a prince, but no one is perfect." Anaya ignored the whispers, but inside she feared being left behind. Every time she passed by Aham, she still carried her old pride. One evening, she saw him coming out of the same small shop he had worked in for years. She smiled bitterly and told her friend, "Look, years have passed but he is still the same poor Aham. Dreams never turn into reality." Her words brought her relief for a moment, but she did not know how wrong she was. Aham, on the other hand, was now dealing with big businessmen from other cities. He invested in technology, real estate, and even trade across borders. His name started appearing in business circles, but he kept it away from his hometown. He wanted to return not with words but with proof, not with anger but with dignity. One day, Aham visited a luxury hotel in another city to finalize a deal. He wore a tailored suit, his shoes shining, his watch elegant. The young boy from the small shop had transformed into a confident man who carried power in his presence. The businessmen respected him, and some even envied him. But Aham's heart still carried the same softness. He remembered the days of mockery, and instead of hatred, he felt only gratitude. The pain of those days had given him the strength he now carried. Back in his hometown, people still mocked him without knowing his truth. When he walked past the tea stalls, men still smirked. When he passed Anaya's house, she still ignored him with pride. But soon, their laughter would freeze. Aham had planned something grand. He wanted to give back to the town where he had suffered, but also where he had learned patience. He decided to hold a charity event for schools, hospitals, and poor families. The event would be the largest the town had ever seen. Invitations were sent across the city, but the name of the host was kept hidden. Everyone was curious. Who was this mysterious millionaire? When the news reached Anaya, she was eager to attend. She imagined it must be some powerful outsider, maybe a businessman from the capital. She told her friends, "We should go. It will be a good chance to meet someone important." She dressed elegantly on the evening of the event, not knowing what fate had prepared for her. Meanwhile, Aham stood in the decorated hall of a grand hotel, looking at the stage where soon he would reveal himself. His heart beat fast, but not from fear. It was the sound of years of struggle finally reaching their moment of victory. As the guests arrived, whispers filled the hall. Everyone was waiting for the mysterious millionaire. Anaya entered with her friends, her eyes scanning the luxurious surroundings. She smiled with satisfaction, unaware that the man she once mocked would soon stand in front of her, not as a poor helper, but as the one who held all the power. The lights dimmed, the music slowed, and the announcer walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome the man who has given new hope to this town, the one whose success story is an inspiration for all." All eyes turned toward the stage. And in that moment, Aham took his first step forward. The hall was filled with hundreds of people. Lights sparkled, music played softly in the background, and the air carried a mixture of excitement and curiosity. Everyone whispered, waiting to see who the mysterious millionaire was. Some guessed it would be a famous businessman from the capital, others thought it might be a foreign investor. No one could imagine that the man about to step on stage was the same boy they once laughed at in the dusty streets of their town. Aham walked calmly towards the stage. He was dressed in a black suit, his shoulders straight, his eyes steady. The poor helper in torn clothes was gone. In his place stood a man of power, confidence, and dignity. As he stepped under the lights, silence spread through the hall. People blinked, rubbed their eyes, and whispered in disbelief. It's Aham," someone finally said. The name moved like fire across the room. Shock froze the crowd. Men who once laughed at him dropped their gaze. Women who had mocked him covered their mouths in surprise. No one spoke loudly. The silence itself screamed louder than words. Anaya stood among her friends, her face pale. Her heart raced, and for the first time in her life, her pride cracked. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Aham." Her friends looked at her with wide eyes, remembering how often she had mocked him. In that moment, all her laughter of the past years came back to her like arrows piercing her heart. Aham reached the microphone. His voice was calm, yet it carried strength that filled every corner of the hall. "Good evening," he said. "Thank you for being here tonight. I stand before you not to show my success, but to remind everyone that dreams do not belong only to the rich. Dreams belong to those who refuse to give up, no matter how much the world mocks them." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some lowered their heads in shame, remembering the times they had mocked him. Aham continued, "Many of you knew me as the poor boy who worked in a shop. You laughed at my torn clothes, you whispered about my empty pockets, and you told me I would never be more than a helper. But I never replied. Not because I was weak, but because I believed that time would reply for me. And tonight, that time has arrived." The hall erupted into applause, though many clapped with trembling hands. The same people who once mocked him now cheered for him, but Aham's eyes remained steady. He was not looking for revenge, he was looking to teach a lesson. Then his eyes searched the crowd until they found Anaya. She stood frozen, her face red with embarrassment. Aham looked at her for a brief moment, and then he smiled softly. That smile carried no anger, only calmness. But to Anaya, it felt heavier than all the insults she had ever thrown at him. Aham then announced the purpose of the event. "Tonight," he said, "I am donating a large part of my wealth to build schools, hospitals, and homes for the poor in this town. The place where I was humiliated will now become the place where children can dream freely. No one will be mocked for being poor again, not if I can help it." The crowd clapped loudly, some even with tears in their eyes. People who had once insulted him now whispered, "We were wrong about him. He is greater than we imagined." Anaya's father, who had also mocked Aham years ago, stood in the crowd with shame. He realized that the man he once saw as worthless now had more honor than anyone else. He lowered his head, unable to face Aham's gaze. As the night continued, Aham spoke to different guests, businessmen, and leaders. Everyone wanted to shake his hand, to take pictures with him, to be seen beside the new star of the town. But Aham remained humble, speaking gently, smiling politely, never letting pride take over. Anaya, however, could not stay calm. She kept replaying her own cruel words in her mind. The times she had laughed at his shoes, his clothes, his dreams. Now, standing in that grand hall, she realized that the boy she mocked had become the man every girl in the town would dream of marrying. Her heart filled with regret. For the first time, she wished she had believed in him. She wished she had not mocked him. But wishes could not change the past. As the event came to an end, Aham once again walked to the stage. He looked around the hall and said, "This is not the end of my journey. It is only the beginning. Life has strange ways of surprising us, and sometimes the greatest surprises are hidden behind years of pain." The audience clapped again, but Anaya's eyes filled with tears. She now understood that Aham was not just a man of wealth, but a man of strength, patience, and forgiveness. Little did she know, the biggest surprise was yet to come. The night of the charity event was unforgettable for the people of the town. They had entered the hall with laughter, gossip, and curiosity, but now they stood in awe of the man they once mocked. Aham's words had touched their hearts, his donations had won their respect, and his calm dignity had silenced their pride. Yet, the evening was not over. Something even greater was about to happen. As the crowd began to relax, thinking the speeches were finished, Aham returned to the stage once more. The lights dimmed, and the music stopped. Everyone grew quiet, eager to hear what he had to say. His face was calm, but there was a spark in his eyes, as if he was about to share something that no one could predict. Tonight, Aham began, I have spoken about dreams, patience, and forgiveness. But there is one more truth I want to share. A truth that belongs not only to me but to all of us. Life is full of surprises. The person you laugh at today might become the person you admire tomorrow. And sometimes, the one you least expect becomes the one meant to walk beside you forever. The audience leaned forward, confused but curious. His words felt like a riddle. Then he paused, letting the silence build suspense. Tonight, he continued, I want to share with you another announcement. Along with building schools and hospitals, I will also begin building a new chapter of my own life. I have chosen the person who will walk this path with me, the person who will be my partner in this journey. Gasps filled the hall. People whispered, he is announcing his marriage. Faces lit up with excitement. Some thought it must be a wealthy businesswoman from the city. Others guessed it might be the daughter of a powerful politician. Everyone turned their eyes towards the stage, waiting for the name. Aham looked around the hall slowly, his gaze calm and steady. Then, in a voice clear and strong, he said the name that made the entire hall fall silent. Anaya. The sound of her name struck the crowd like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then whispers spread like wildfire. Anaya. Did he say Anaya? The same girl who mocked him. People's eyes turned towards her. She stood frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling. She could not believe her ears. Her friends gasped loudly, covering their mouths. Some looked at her with envy, others with shock. Anaya's father almost stumbled where he stood, unable to process what was happening. Aham's eyes remained on her. He smiled softly and said, Yes, Anaya. The same girl who once laughed at me. The same girl who never believed in my dreams. Tonight, I choose her as my partner. Because life is not about holding grudges. It is about forgiving, about turning pain into strength, and about proving that love can grow even in the unlikeliest places. The hall erupted with applause, though many clapped in disbelief. Some whispered, Why her? After all she said. Others said, He is greater than all of us. Only a man with a big heart can forgive like this. Anaya's eyes filled with tears. She remembered every cruel word, every time she laughed at his broken shoes, every time she mocked his dreams. Now, standing in front of him, she felt both shame and gratitude. She stepped forward slowly, each step heavy with emotion. When she reached the stage, she looked at him with trembling lips. Aham, she whispered, her voice breaking, after everything I said, after everything I did, why me? Aham looked at her gently. Because, he said, you were part of my journey. Your laughter gave me strength. Your words pushed me forward when I wanted to stop. Without you, maybe I would not have become the man I am today. So instead of hatred, I choose gratitude. Instead of revenge, I choose love. The crowd fell silent again. Some wiped tears from their eyes. The same people who once mocked him now watched a scene they would never forget. Aham reached out his hand, and Anaya, with tears streaming down her face, placed her hand in his. The hall exploded in claps, cheers, and shouts of joy. In that moment, the story of Mockery turned into a story of marriage. From that day forward, Aham was no longer just the poor boy they once laughed at. He was the man who showed them the power of patience, the beauty of forgiveness, and the greatness of love. The town would never forget that night. Children would grow up hearing the story of Aham, the boy who carried stones of mockery in his pockets and built a castle of dreams out of them. And Anaya, once the proud girl who laughed, became the woman who stood beside him, forever a reminder that life's greatest surprises are hidden in the most unexpected places. From mockery to marriage, Aham's story was written not with revenge, but with grace. And that is why it became the greatest surprise the town had ever seen.